All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'chelam shehakol nevi borei.
Amen.
Amen.
L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim. Yeah, it's not because I have the other thing up. All right. Welcome. And let's hope I have everything worked out here properly. Let's see if I can do this. Ooh. Are you seeing?
Yeah. It says Torah studies, the big pink screen.
The whole thing's pink?
Yeah, it's all pink and it says Torah studies, VaYeitzei, the spiritual trifecta.
Yeah, why is it? Oh, okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Perfect. Ooh. Okay, thank you. There's a ghost in it. Yes. Ooh. You got some feedback over here. Got some feedback over here. It's a time delay. Is there still a feedback over here? Is there still a feedback over here? There is. I know why, because here. There we go. Okay. My gosh. Not a dull moment over here. Baruch Hashem. Okay. We're still live on Facebook, correct? Yeah, okay, good. Now you're seeing. Now. All right. Beautiful. Okay, folks. So we're in the middle of a war, right? Oh, yeah. And the question is, what can you learn from a war? After all, life is a war. What does that mean, that life is a war? So someone was once complaining to the Rebbe, life is such a struggle. You know, there's so many difficulties I have to go through. So everyone smiled to one person and to a woman and said, you were never promised a rose garden. As the old saying, right? Oh, she got it from the Rebbe. Life is meant to be. There's the struggle. How do we deal with the struggle is the issue. Right? It's a battle. It's a war. The word lechem means bread. Right? Motzi lechem min haaretz. Also means lochem, to battle. To battle for your bread. Right? For your livelihood. To battle. So whether it's livelihood, whatever, we all have issues. We all have things that we need to battle with. And we need to overcome. Right? We have to overcome the enemy. Who's the real enemy? Oh, Sharon, I think that's the first time you ever said that.
I don't think so, but I just know that's what you say.
Oh, is that what? Oh, that's what I said. Uh-huh. You don't agree. You say the enemy's from without. Right. So, yeah, the enemy from within. So let us get right into the story. So this week's Parshah. Yaakov, the third of the three patriarchs. He makes him his way to Haran Afshel Olam, the angry spot of the world, where he has to deal with his father-in-law, who he becomes his father-in-law. Lavan. Who's this Lavan? He's a trickster. He's a deceitful person. He's a demanding boss. He's trouble. He's difficulty, right? But the battle he had with him wasn't so much in the livelihood, even though in livelihood he had a battle. He changed his wages 100 times. Whenever they came to an agreement, he did something, he was successful. Well, let's change things about, right? But that wasn't what his problem was. His problem was he had a nice, beautiful family, 12 sons, and he needed to raise them appropriately in a proper atmosphere. So he needed divine assistance. So what did he do for divine assistance? What did he do for divine assistance? So, okay. Oh. So here it didn't change. No.
It's still the pink screen on this
Huh?
on our. You still see just the pink screen,
You see just the pink screen.
right?
Okay.
There you go.
Now it's good, but not good here. Ay, 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 ay. Excuse me a moment. I try to fix this. Okay. Fix two. Okay. Be this way, but you know what? Whatever. My apologies. Figure out things. Okay. So what prayers did he chant? The Talmud tells us, Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Levi, he said that he chanted the 15 songs of ascent from the book of Psalms. Shira Malot. You know, we sing by on Shabbos before benching. Shira Malot Beshuva da 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 da. Right? So that Shira Malot is one of the 15 songs of ascent. In the Holy Temple, there were 15 steps that separated the women's courtyard from the Israelite, the men's courtyard. And there they sang these 15 psalms on these 15 steps, the Levites. They would sing it every day. So Yaakov, he knew these 15 songs. These songs are old songs, not just from the time of King David, from before. And he would say them for 20 years. Now, what's the connection? The 15? So interesting. It tells us oops. That the King David sang 15 songs of ascent corresponding to the 15 years span which all three patriarchs were alive. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they spanned their three generations, 15 years together. grandfather, son, and grandson. As Rabbi says in this week's Sikha, Avram lived till 175. Yitzchak was born when Avraham was 100 years old. Yaakov was born when Yitzchak was 60 years. So what do we have? A 15-year span when all three patriarchs lived simultaneously. So you have from 1653 before the Common Era to 1638 before the Common Era. The world was a wonderful place. All three patriarchs lived at the same time. Right, the forces, the beauty of them was on display for the world. Right, and this then is what Yaakov uses to battle against the deceit of Lavan, the corruption of Lavan. In other words, Yaakov wasn't alone. Who was he with? His father and grandfather. Even though his grandfather wasn't alive. His father was alive. Huh? Right. I'm talking about for the 20 years, he was alive, right? So what we need to understand, what is this concept over here of invoking the three generations, that became the form of prayer that he used, right? The 15 songs of ascent that represent the 15 years that they lived at the same time, meaning that their power, their energy, their light was in the world at the same time. So he's invoking that in his battle against Lavan. We need to understand that. Is that clear, the question? Yeah? Everybody online, the question's clear? Good.
Yes.
So we're going to go into war now, to the famous 7-year war. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, between Prussia and Austria. I'm sure you all learned this in American history or Canadian history. Okay, I'm joking. In European history. The Alter Rebbe, 2 days before he passed, he shared with his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, who became the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, after the passing of the Alter Rebbe's son. He shared with him something that he heard 50 years earlier from his study partner, Avram the Malach. Avram the Malach was the son of the Mizitcher Magid, and they studied together. And what he heard from them was based on the 7-year war that occurred between 1757 and 1763. A year later, at the tender age of 19, the Alter Rebbe came to the Mizitcher Magid in 1764. The reason why he came to the Mizitcher Magid is because he was already a renowned scholar in Talmudic teachings and Jewish law, but he came to him because he felt he didn't have enough of a background in prayer. So he came to him. Not that he didn't pray, and believe me, his prayers, I'm sure, were very special, but it wasn't matching what he felt. So he came to the Mizitcher Magid to learn from him. So that's when he came. The year before, the 7-year war between Prussia and Austria had ended, and the world was ablaze about it. Why? Is because King Frederick of Prussia was, so to speak, on his last leg. And for him, it was, win or die. And he was up against a stronger Austrian and greater army. But yet the battle ensued. the world was talking about the great victory afterwards, and the Chassidim were also talking about it. Why were the Chassidim talking about the battle? Is because we have a teachings from the Baal Shem Tov that says that everything that we see and hear contains a lesson from God about how to serve Him better. We must seek the underlying meaning and not, God forbid, misunderstand the intent. So the whole world was ablaze about the victory of Prussia, of King Frederick, over a much stronger army of Charles and his army battling against Frederick. So by Chassidim, they had to learn a lesson from this. There had to be something here that's important for us to recognize. And this is the background of our story over here. So the famous battle and the battle maneuver of King Frederick of Prussia was at was in Loten, Poland, where the battle there was a unique battle. And the Alter Rebbe explains, the traditional order of battle is that each army divides its forces into 3 divisions, one in the center and 2 flanking right and left. The opposing military arrays its troops in much the same way. When the signal is given, each division battles its opposite number. Right? That's the way traditional warfare took place, right? And you know, when you have a large army like the king of like Austria had 65,000 troops, 65,000 troops took an area of 4 miles. So to make any kind of maneuver with that kind of army back in the day is almost impossible. So this is the way they set up and ready for war. So each side had basically the same setup, and that's how they battled. Frederick knew that if he was going to battle that way, there's no way he could win. He's outnumbered 2-1 in literal numbers. So what did he do? He made took a few of his men and made as if they're coming to battle in the regular formation. Well, he took really all of the 3 flanks and brought them from around the backside, covered by the hills, because he knew the terrain, and it was a surprise attack from a different flank, where that confused them because there's no communication back in the day, right? We're able to then, through that surprise, to defeat them soundly. Oops. The Austrian left was commanded by the Hungarian Hussar General Nadasti. Nadasti watched the horror as the Prussian columns appeared behind Lobnitz and wheeled around his flank. He dispatched orderly after orderly to Prince Charles at the other end of the Austrian line with messages that the Prussian attack was about to fall on the left flank. Prince Charles was unconvinced and sought to take action to remedy the situation when no attack developed on the right flank. He came to the conclusion the Prussian army had seen the extent to which it was outnumbered and hurried away south in full retreat. So he thought they came. He had a small little army that came, and he figured, they're retreating because they're losing. It wasn't a retreat, right? That's what he thought. So therefore, he didn't move around his troops. In any case, the Austrian line was so long that it took the best of an hour or more to move a significant body of infantry from right to left. Nadasti was beyond assistance. By the time the sun set, Prussians were triumphant, and Frederick made history on how a small army defeated a much more larger army. Brilliant tactics. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says. Frederick succeeded because he brilliantly arrayed all three of his divisions against a single division of the enemy. This tactic is called atakirin. And this tactic, all three divisions surround and engage a single division of the enemy and overpower it. Subsequently, they attack the enemy's second and third divisions, respectively, in like manner until the enemy was defeated. Again, the regular type of warfare, right, is frontal and is a frontal warfare. So each side is, dealing with their division. But here it was a 3-1, and because of overpowering them, and then that one division wasn't able to be replenished quickly enough because of the other divisions. They didn't have didn't have communication like we do today. And Prince Charles was sure that they were just retreating. So they had defeated them, or maybe they were going after them, I don't know. But in any case, till they had to reorient themselves, it was too late and they lost the war. So, says the Alter Rebbe, that there needs to be a lesson that we learn from this. You have to understand that back in the day, this was the talk of the town. This wasn't just the talk of all of Europe, because it was unique in this battle tactic. Chassidim spoke about it. But Chassidim spoke about it. There must be a lesson that we learn out from this. And what is the lesson that we learn out? Right, in our battle, in fighting the internal war, which is our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination. So says the Alter Rebbe as follows. The lesson from the saintly Rabbi Avram derived from this. In the service of God, we must battle our internal negative urges, for God enables unholiness to counter holiness. As we have positive holy traits such as love, reverence, compassion, beautification, to name a few, so are we endowed with attraction to unholy pleasures, aversion to piety. One would think that the best way to restrain and even transform the unholy forces is to fight each trait with the opposite number. Arousing our love for holiness displaces and subdues our passion for the inappropriate pleasures. Similarly, reverence for the sanctity expels inappropriate fear. This is like the conventional war, in which each division battles the enemy's corresponding division. So there's 3 flanks, right? Why are there 3 flanks? Right, left, and center. Because in the spiritual war, we also have 3 forces. We have the positive disposition, right? What's the positive? The things that we love in life that are not meant for us in life, right? And then there are the things, the negative things, right? The fear, the anger, the hedonism. That's another flank in our lives. They're on the left. Then we have the center, the central, which is the pride, the boastfulness, right? That we all have. So the traditional way to fight your negative urges or your negative feelings was you're feeling anger. So you need to fight angry with becoming angry at yourself. Anger, that's a terrible trait. You're going to go to hell with that. Would be one way. Or, you would fight it. How? With, as you fight fire with fire, right? You fight it with that negativity of bringing it down. In other words, you have that you're feeling anger towards another individual, so you berate yourself. That's not right. That's not proper. That's not holy. We should, I should have self-restraint. I shouldn't think these bad thoughts. It's a terrible thing. It's going to just bring me down a slippery slope. I'm going to be negative towards, it'll lead me to more sins and so on and so forth. And that's fighting one flank in our negative makeup with the positive flank in our healthy makeup, right? And that is a way to deal with that. Does anybody see a problem with that? With that kind of warfare? Hmm?
Well, it might work for a short period of time. But then I mean, you're really tired always having to do that same thing over and over again because it's just fighting a feeling with a feeling.
Excellent. And not only that, what will that feeling bring you to ultimately if you're fighting it over and over?
You're exhausted.
Yeah, but what feeling is it going to bring you to? Guilt. If you're always constantly berating yourself for the negativity, eventually you're going to come to a place of guilt because, I'm just good for nothing. Obviously, I can't overcome this. Obviously, I can't overcome this. And you're going to be feeling a good for nothing. And that will be the beginning of a real slide downwards as a result, right?
Things like that.
Many people do. I think most people do. Most people who are interested to deal with their issues, right? Most people don't deal with their issues. Most people, they blame someone on the outside, right? You made me do that. You know, if you wouldn't have said that, I would have answered that way. But that's not taking responsibility for what you said. Just because someone said something to you, so you got angry? Well, you mean they control you? So that's how most people think. So therefore, they're not owning their lives. But someone who owns their life, not talking about someone, most people don't own their lives, and most people are go around without, taking responsibility. But for the people who do take responsibility, so this path in taking responsibility for your life is saying that I'm dealing with my stuff. I'm dealing with it, but I'm dealing with it again, attacking it with one for one, so to speak. This is the negative nature. Fight fire with fire. I'm going to bear upon it something that's going to eradicate it. So if it's the anger that I have, so speaking to myself in this derogatory manner of that's a terrible way to act. You shouldn't be this way, and the focus is very much on yourself, right? It's very much on yourself. And the problem with that, because it's a focus on yourself and your negative nature, is that it may work, but then after time, if you haven't solved it, you're going to become very dejected. You're going to feel guilty, and that will bring you to even more negative behavior. But even if you do deal with it properly, right? The point, though, is that the focus is so much on yourself. And I'm giving you that point as opposed to another method, which we'll get into in a moment, okay? But is that clear so far? Now, so even if we're successful, as the Alter Rebbe says, the rule, sacred traits are more potent than the opposite numbers, unholy, profane traits. As light is superior to darkness, so the holiness is superior to unholiness. Right? So in other words, our holy trait of having the fear and awe of God can overcome our anger. Our love for God can overcome our love for material things, because our love for God is stronger and more potent. It can overcome it, right? But as we said, this might not be foolproof. as the Alter Rebbe says. The truth is that this method is sometimes insufficient to win the war. At times, the unholy side rises with desperate intensity to win the battle. This is consistent with the passage, one kingdom will alternately be mightier than the other. It's last week's Torah portion when Rivka was pregnant with Yaakov and Esav, right? So what was the prophecy told to her? That one nation will be stronger than another nation, sometimes this one, sometimes that one. Sometimes the holy nation of Yaakov will be stronger, sometimes the unholy nation of Esav will be stronger. So what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here is that even though God gave the holiness in us greater power than the unholiness in us, but that might not always be the case. Sometimes there'll be such an intensity of a lust, of an addiction that is so powerful. An addiction doesn't mean just to alcohol or drugs. An addiction could be a temperament that we have, that we're so addicted to seeing the negative, right? We're so addicted to seeing the negative, to seeing the cup. Oh, my cup is half empty. Oh, right? That's an addiction too, by the way. It's a mental addiction. There's emotional addictions. And then there are addictions that express themselves in actions that we do, like drinking alcohol and, in a inappropriate way, and drugs, right? So what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here, that the traditional way to battle with our stuff, owning our battles, that our battles are ultimately within. Because as we know, when we battle properly within, then whatever we need to deal from without will fall into place. It will fall into place. That person's not my problem. My problem is me and how I deal with that person appropriately, right? That's my problem. But the one-to-one onslaught will not always be the way to deal with it from within, because it might be bigger and stronger than me, right? So, therefore, we need a different form of warfare. Actually goes in now. So Parshah says, before we go into that, there are two drawbacks. First is the winning side always suffers losses when enemy armies square off face to face in the old form of battle, right? And the second is there might be warriors and leaders among the survivors who flee the battlefield. With time, they might raise a new army and put up new resistance. Okay, and in the spiritual warfare, so he says is the same thing is true. What's the spiritual warfare? The same is true. A traditional method to fight inappropriate urges versus the technique innovated by the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov. The traditional Jewish ethics books derided the negative traits and explained why we must eschew them. For example, they described the decadence of arrogance, haughtiness, and the lust, and there are many iterations. Examining each of these traits in detail to distance ourselves from them leads to two inevitable consequences. The first is that contemplating our own consuming shameful need for honor and prestige inadvertently triggers haughtiness. Like when you're going to fight against fire with fire, I have a sense of haughtiness. I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, that's terrible. You're a haughty person. That you need so much, prestige and honor, and people to gloat after you, and so on." That will ultimately is going to inadvertently also triggers the haughtiness because you're talking to it, so it's going to trigger it. The second is that we can't entirely eradicate our natural negative traits because self-love closes our eyes to the extent of our faults. This is certainly true with our subtle flaws. After all, we use our natural finite minds to battle our natural blemishes, and our fallible reason is incapable of fully identifying and exercising our natural flaws. Right? So, Chassidus came with a new method now. That was the old method. So the war is interesting. Literally, the war in Parshah in Austria happened right before the Alter Rebbe comes to the Mizitcher Magid. And at the same time, this is when this new development on how to deal in war came about in the spiritual sense. So rather than to focus on how bad you are, right? Or, if you're mean to your spouse, how mean I am, right? And I have to get over my meanness. I have to eradicate that meanness in me, right? Comes Chassidus and says, rather than telling God how big your problems is, tell your problems how big God is, right? If you worry about your grave sins, God forbid, set aside our opportune times when the mind is calm to reflect on the greatness of God against whom you have sinned. The first approach is thinking about me. Thinking about me. And thinking about how bad I am. Look, I've tried so hard to be a good husband. I've tried so hard to be a good friend. I tried so hard to be a good parent. I tried so hard this, and I keep coming back to the same problem, same fault, same issue, and I always, I'm aware of that negativity, and I fight that negativity, but the problem is I'm always focused on me and my negativity, right? That's the problem. This afternoon, Simcha shared with me an article from the Washington Post, very intriguing. A young lady, when she's 23 years old, she writes in the Washington Post, I don't know if it's an op-ed or exactly what, but she writes about her her desire to take her life. And she had it all planned. She drank herself enough to be dazed. And she came to the subway in San Francisco. And she had it all planned out just to throw herself in front. Life was too painful. And as she's like all planned out, someone taps her on the shoulder and says to her, a 19-year-old girl says, pink hair, says to her, my first time in San Francisco, I want a picture. Could you take a picture of me, please? And she goes and takes a picture of her. And after the 15-second encounter, all of a sudden, all of her plans dissolved in that moment. And she goes out, the metro, the subway came, and it was too late. I mean, she could have waited for the next one, but it was dissolved. She went outside, and then she saw some people playing guitar and having a nice time, and she looks in. So she doesn't write this in the article, and we have to maybe connect with her and tell her. But she didn't get the real message. The real message was, what is suicide? It's the most selfish act that there is suicide. Who are you thinking about when you commit suicide? Only yourself. You're not thinking about anybody else. The pain is so great that you can only think about yourself, right? What happened? A 19-year-old girl only asked her to take a picture. All of a sudden, she wasn't thinking about herself for 10 seconds. All it took was 10, 15 seconds a shot, maybe 25 seconds, right? But for that little bit of time, she wasn't thinking about herself. It dissolved that powerful desire to take her life. And now we're 7 years later, and she just wrote the article in the Washington Post. If you put Washington Post suicide, her article will come up. I think it's a Jewish girl. What's the point I'm making? In the battle that we fight with ourselves, if you're thinking about yourself, in the battle, right? And about, oh, I'm so terrible. You know what? You may not win the battle. You probably won't win the battle. I'm such a mean guy. I'm such a mean guy. You know, you're not going to win the battle because you're focused on yourself. If, though, you were focused on who you were mean to and reflected on the greatness of that person and how wonderful that person is, right? That would be different. If you focus on the greatness of God, and that's what he's saying over here, on the greatness of God against whom you have sinned, then you're taking it off you, even though you did the wrong thing. But the focus isn't on you. The focus is on what you did to God. What will that lead you to? To a greater love of God, a greater sense of awe of God, and compassion for him. This is the uniqueness that we're talking about over here. Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
It's not really revealed.
The what?
It's not revealed.
What's not revealed?
It's not as obvious as it was when we look at this, but it's not as obvious as we get just kind of hidden, you know? So it's kind of
Right.
to ascribe to something that you really have nothing concrete. Like this girl stopped her, whatever was going on in her head was a real concrete interaction.
Right.
You know, is a concrete interaction taking the Psalms and reading them? Is that the concrete? Because just to say, well, you know, Hashem, I know how much you.
Well, you know what? We'll get there in a moment. No, excellent question. Excellent question. Excellent question. Excellent. Hold on to it. We're going to get there. Okay. So says the Alter Rebbe in text number 11, the best way to arouse all three positive urges to surround the battle, a single inappropriate appetite, this will undoubtedly displace and defeat it. It is Atakirin method of bringing three armies to bear against one and to attack it from an oblique position. Similarly, after defeating one first inappropriate urge, we array all three positive holy desires against the second inappropriate urge and attack it. Continue this way until all the cravings are defeated. The point over here is you're thinking about God and you're using your qualities of love of God, fear and awe of God, and compassion for God, right? So let's take it, you sinned with a loved one. You were mean to them. You were mean, right? They triggered you. Well, if you own your life, then you know you have to own your trigger. It's your trigger. You own it, right? So now you're responsible for it. So how are you going to defeat it? You're going to defeat it one-on-one? Oh, I'm terrible. That was the old way. That was Musar. Well, that's what Musar did. Musar brought you to feeling terrible about being bad, right? But Alter Rebbe is saying no. Chassidus is saying no. Don't use that approach. Use the three-pronged approach of love, awe, and compassion for God. Or translated, if you did it to a person, so that's the concreteness, you could use it for a person, right? That if you were mean to a loved one, if you think about that loved one in a loving way, in how awesome they are, and how to have compassion for their challenges. Imagine you did all that. Imagine you thought about a loved one, right? That you were mean to, and you think about the love towards them, right? What draws and attracts you. You think about what's awesome about them. And yet at the same time, you even have compassion on them. Compassion like, okay, they have their shortcomings, they have their issues, what's going to happen? That meanness is going to dissolve away much more quickly. That make sense? No? Helen, you're not with me? No, Sharon. You could choose to be that way without anybody else being that way. That's a choice. If one second. Let's take this apart first. You were mean. The colossal you, not you. Helen can never be mean. she couldn't be, so yeah, that's why, right. Are you responsible for that? Yes or no? You are, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You're responsible for your behavior, right? Okay. So, and you want to fix it. So you could be down on yourself to fix it, like the old method, right? Fighting one front with one front. Or you could use the three fronts against the one front. And the three fronts here, right, is not the usual front. Usually fire with fire. This is not saying fire with fire. Don't come bear down on your negativity with a negativity. Bear down on with an opaque battle. And that is that you're taking on not on what you did, but who you did it to. And you think about them, again, one's loved one. Let's use the concrete, because from the concrete, then we can come to doing it for Hashem too, right? We could. If we first can do it with the concrete, we'll be able to do it for Hashem likewise. That makes sense? So what are you thinking? You're thinking about your loved one, of why they're your loved one. What's the love between you and them? What's awesome about them? And we're to have compassion for them. In other words, compassion because they do have shortcomings. And maybe what they did that triggered me, I have compassion for. That makes sense? Amy, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is my first time attending an evening talk. I usually do the Tanya in the morning. Is the lady's voice in the background, is it your wife?
No, it's not my wife. It's Helen.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering because she has a beautiful, beautiful voice, and she has a lot of good points too.
Yes, absolutely, she does.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's why she couldn't be mean to anybody.
I'm sorry. I'm new and I just wanted to know if she was
Yeah,
part
no,
of the.
thank you.
All right. Sorry. Thank you.
No. Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Okay. So that was beautiful. All right. So is that method clear? Yeah. Everybody online, is it clear?
Yes. Very.
All right, beautiful. So this is a tactic that was revealed by the students of the Baal Shem Tov from that 7-year war and that famous battle. And this is what Yaakov Avinu, he used when he was 20 years by his father-in-law Lavan, in order to be able to deal with his deceptiveness, his unholiness, and he sang the 15 songs of ascent, the Shir Hamalot, which correspond to the 15 years that the three patriarchs lived on this earth together, meaning their energy, their light was here at the same time. Avram embodies loving kindness. Yitzchak embodies gvura, strength, and awe. And Yaakov, he embodies compassion, the three patriarchs. So invoking all three patriarchs and their qualities for himself to wage a battle, that's how he was able to survive. So says the Rebbe in this week's Likutei Sichos, to survive our exile, we too require 15 songs of ascent, the Shir Malay, that correspond to the 15 years that the patriarchs were alive simultaneously. This is because the three patriarchs represent the three cardinal sacred traits: love, reverence, and compassion. When we simultaneously tap into all three patriarchs and their sacred qualities, we can overcome and even obliterate every trial we encounter in exile. Wow. We see that it's interesting. Avram, he was loving kindness, right? That's what he was. That was his primary focus of hospitality. Yitzchak was reverence, discipline. He dug wells. He brought the hidden treasure that's beneath the earth, right? That's strength, right? To dig deep. He was able to dig deep. Yaakov, compassion. He blended the both of love and reverence. So we see that also historically. Avram, he dug wells, but the Philistines, they stopped them up. They plugged them up. Yitzchak opened up the wells and dug new wells. The Philistines couldn't close them. So he complemented, in other words, Yitzchak complemented the love of his father, Avraham. How? With discipline. Because love on its own will get plugged up, right? It's not enough. You need to have together with it is discipline, right? To make, to be able to have those two things together. Now, that being said, that's not even sufficient. Who ultimately unplugged and had even greater power? This week's Torah portion. Who? Yaakov. What did he do? He unplugged, right, the huge boulder that was covering over the reservoir of water that when the shepherds came to get water for their flock, when Rachel came at that same time also. So he was able to overcome even the most powerful thing that was plugged up, and to reveal the reservoir of water, the reservoir of life. So the key to this, to the teachings over here, is as follows. Rav Mendel Futerfatz, who was known as the Chassid's Chassid, who spent 12 years in Siberian camps. We've told many stories about him over there, many classes. So when he got out of Siberia, he came to America. So it was before Yom Kippur, and he was asking some yeshiva bachrim as they're preparing for Yom Kippur, with what are you going to pray on Yom Kippur? You know, what's going to be your focus on Yom Kippur? So the bachrim said, on our sins and to seek forgiveness. So he says to them, on the holiest day of the year, that's what you're going to do? You're going to think about sin? That would be so inappropriate. So they said to him, okay, so then what should we do? I mean, it's Yom Kippur. What are we supposed to do? You should think about how great God is and what God has done for you in your life to arouse a great love and a reverence for God. And then from there, you'll regret your sins automatically. That's the point of the story. When we're focused on ourselves, even in fixing ourselves, we will not get beyond ourselves. If you're focused on the sin, I sinned, I did this, I did that. It sounds good. And that was good back in the day. But came a war between Austria and Prussia, came the Malach and taught the Alter Rebbe a lesson. What is the lesson we learned from this? And then this was divulged to us for all generations to come, that there's a new way to wage battle. We wage battle, we take all of the three prongs that we have, the three fronts, and we wage war on one. And we're not waging war with our negative, fighting fire with fire, We're waging war by our internal war. Right? But that's our internal war, right? Our internal war. We wage it with the positive qualities that we have, that we focus on, not ourselves, but on to whom we have sinned. Yeah. And I promise you, if you try this, you will be different people. You'll focus on the love that you have. Try it with a person. You try it with God too, but try it with a person. The love, the bond that you have with that person, you focus and meditate upon that. About the reverence and the awesomeness towards that person, and compassion that you have for them. Right? Compassion meaning you recognize that they have challenges, and to that you have compassion. Whatever feelings that you're having of anger to that person, of whatever, they'll dissolve away. If you try the original way, it's a rotten thing to have such negative thoughts. Those negative thoughts are going to come back, and eventually you're going to feel guilty. You're not going to be able to deal with it. And if we can do that with a loved one, then we can do that for Hashem also. That'll take a little more effort, like Helen, like you said, right? But we'll be able to do it. All right. Any questions, folks? Any comments? Any thoughts? Beautiful, powerful idea.
Indeed. Great class.
Amy, thank you. Amy, where do you watch our the Daily Tanya? On Facebook, on
Instagram.
On Instagram. Okay. Beautiful.
Thank you so much, and thank you to your wife. I know she's not there right now, but I'll try to reach her because I would love her to be my mentor.
Okay.
Thank you.
You can private message me and I'll try to make the connection if you need. Okay?
God willing, thank you.
Okay. God bless. Any questions? Leonard?
No, I don't have questions, but I liked very much how you wove together the different themes to ultimately come to a central idea, which is that you have to change the whole context of your mind, of your the mindset and the framework within which you approach things, because until you do that, you can't really connect with God.
Yeah.
It's like, I can tell you personally, it's a whole new shift, not just knowledge and so forth, but the whole way you're wired to think in modern life is not at all what you just described. So starting with other people is a great way to do that.
Yeah, totally. But and that's why battle, what's interesting, really, as the Baal Shem Tov taught us, literally everything we see in here is only a metaphor for godliness. Everything is a metaphor. Everything is a life lesson. So
right.
Here's this battle, and Chassidim were so excited. The whole world was excited for a physical battle, and the Chassidim were wow, this has got to be some unbelievable message from God about what it means, the internal battle, which is amazing. And think about it, the whole world till that point was focused on this form of combat, and all of a sudden that switched, and that brought a whole new way to see how to deal with the inner battle. Because since the nature of a person is to be self-absorbed and self-centered, right? even in our working on ourselves, we're also self-absorbed and self-centered.
Right. Of course.
And here comes Hasidus and says, no, 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 no. There's a new angle over here. It's not about you. It's not about you, which is, by the way, it's so freeing, because the other way is so debilitating that it will make you having feelings of guilt. And here there's no guilt, but there's real responsibility. There isn't this sense of guilt. There's a feeling of responsibility, but it's like, it's not about me. It's about who I did it to. And if I recognize who I did it to, then I would never be that way.
Right.
And I boy, does it work. It's the only issue is that it takes work. It's not a simple thing, not easy, because
No, but it's very timely as we
to be very self-directed.
Well, but we come out of the whole me generation. So it's very timely, even though the inspiration was like 2-3 centuries ago.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. All right, folks. Thank you. Amazing, as always.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. TRC, please.